I only meant to do something simple, quietly open John's bedroom door to wish him good night, then close it softly behind me. A pure, innocent moment just like 1,000 others before. But tonight, the moment I eased the door open, I froze. Bathed in the soft, muted glow of the night lamp, it wasn't John lying under the familiar blankets. It was William. He sat there at the edge of the bed, his hands loosely clasped between his knees, his gaze steady, unwavering, locked onto mine, calm, unflinching. It was a silent look but deep and consuming, as if, for a fleeting instant, all the careful walls we had built between us crumbled, exposing something raw, heated, and unnamed. I heard my own heartbeat roar in my ears, pounding wildly against my ribs. I should have looked away. I should have said something, broken the heavy stillness that had fallen over us. But I stood there, fingers gripping the doorknob, paralyzed, caught in the spell of William's gaze. A shiver danced across my skin, not from fear, but from something alive, urgent, stirring awake after too many years of silent slumber. In that endless moment, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. A mother, a woman, or simply a human being seeing herself truly reflected for the first time in years. And in the depths of William's eyes, I understood. Tonight would not end like all the nights before. I forced myself to steady, reminding myself that this was William, John's best friend, the boy who once ran laughing across my backyard in a sweaty jersey after soccer practice. The boy I had always known. Or so I thought. But under the tender light of the room, he was no longer that boy. William had grown. His shoulders broader, his body solid, his face carrying a quiet gravity that stole the breath from my lungs. His hair fell softly over his forehead, and his deep brown eyes seemed heavy with words left unsaid. That maturity, that stillness, pulled me toward him unconsciously, making each breath I took feel heavier. I realized with a sinking shock that I had been staring too long, too closely. Part of me screamed to remember the lines that should never be crossed. But another part, quieter, yet infinitely stronger, simply wanted to savor this fleeting moment where the past and present blurred together and left all rules forgotten. When our eyes locked again, I no longer saw the boy I once knew. I only saw a young man silently seeing me as if I were the only thing that existed in the room, in the world. And something deep inside me, frozen for so long, stirred. Shy, uncertain, but undeniably alive. William spoke first, his voice low and rough, threaded with the hush of the night. "John's already asleep." Just a simple sentence. Yet it hung in the thick air between us, weighted with a meaning far greater than the words themselves. I nodded, afraid that if I tried to speak, my voice would betray me. My hand still clutched the doorknob, like someone teetering at the edge of a cliff, terrified that letting go would mean falling into something from which there was no return. William's eyes never left me. They didn't pull, didn't demand, but there was a patient gravity there. A silent force that drew me closer without ever needing to say a word. I stepped inside, pretending to fuss with John's blankets. A clumsy, unnecessary movement, giving myself a reason to linger. Each step felt like treading across a floor alive with hidden currents. I could feel William's gaze tracing my every move, not lewd, not invasive, but so tender, so quietly reverent, that it made the air around me tighten and hum against my skin. As I bent down to pull the blanket up to John's chin, I could feel the silent weight behind me, pressing against my back, making each breath feel tight and fragile. I fought to keep my hands steady, pretending to be busy with meaningless tasks while my heart thundered chaotically inside my chest. When I finally turned around, William was still sitting there, his hands resting loosely between his knees, his face composed but his eyes glowing with something unnamed and fierce. A charge ran down my spine, invisible but undeniable. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to, because in that moment we both knew. Something was rising between us, gentle yet unstoppable. I scrambled to find my voice, to cling to anything that could pull me out of the sweet, dizzying haze wrapping around me. Just making sure John isn't cold," I whispered, the words clumsy and absurd in the heavy air. William smiled softly, almost imperceptibly. A breath of a smile, but it ignited a powerful storm inside me. He didn't say anything more. He just sat there, letting me drown in the quiet chaos of my own making. I moved past him, feigning busyness, rummaging needlessly through the closet for an extra pillow. But every movement felt clumsy, exposing how hyper-aware I was of his presence behind me, warm, steady, and terrifying in its patience. When I risked a glance over my shoulder, his eyes were still on me, not demanding, not grasping, but whispering silently, "I see you." Not as John's mother. Not merely as a woman older than him deserving respect, but as a whole human being, with wounds, with longings, with a hidden beauty aching to be seen. No one touched. No invitations were spoken aloud. Yet between us the air thickened, wrapped around our bodies, seeped under the skin, a silent hunger building, needing only the lightest touch to set it ablaze. I clutched the pillow tighter, gripping it as if it could anchor me to the rules I had always lived by, even as my heart had already drifted far beyond them. William shifted slightly, a small movement, but it made the room vibrate like a deep, trembling note. "You always made this place feel like home," he said, his voice low, roughened to a whisper, as if speaking any louder might shatter the delicate atmosphere surrounding us. I stood frozen, my breath caught painfully in my chest. A simple sentence. Yet from William's lips, it carried a weight that nearly undid me. It wasn't a polite compliment. It wasn't the empty gratitude of a lonely boy. It was a raw confession, pure, honest, as if he had split his chest open and laid his heart bare at my feet. I gripped the pillow harder, needing something tangible to cling to, because I no longer trusted my own strength. All my life, I had seen myself as just a mother, clumsy, tired, trying to piece together a decent life for my son and his loud, unruly friends. But through William's eyes in that moment I saw something else. A tenderness, a warmth, a significance I thought had long since withered away. I wanted to say something. A polite thank you, a gentle deflection. Anything to stop myself from slipping deeper. But my throat closed up. Only my heart spoke, pounding wildly, yearning toward the young, burning warmth standing just a few feet away. And in that suspended breath I knew. Something had awakened inside me. Something I could no longer bury. I brushed past William toward the door, my whole body taut with a nameless tension. I didn't dare look directly at him, afraid that even a glance would be enough to unravel the last fragile threads of my restraint. As my hand touched the doorknob, William reached out. It was not a grab. It was a whisper of a touch, just his fingertips barely brushing the inside of my wrist. So light, so tentative, that if it weren't for the jolt traveling down my spine, I might have thought I had imagined it. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs, my hand clenched around the doorknob like someone clinging to the edge of a precipice. William didn't try to hold me. He didn't press. He simply touched, a silent question, a hesitant plea, a fragile hope that I wouldn't pull away. Slowly I turned to face him, my eyes searching his. In William's gaze there was no coercion, no reckless desire. Only trembling respect. Only an aching, barely contained yearning. I should have stepped back. I should have reminded him about the lines that must never be crossed, about responsibility, about right and wrong, about all the rules I had once promised myself I would never betray. But in that moment all I saw was a young man looking at me as if I were the only thing left in his world. A woman longing to live, to feel, to be loved, feelings I had forgotten how to recognize after so many lonely years. I gently pulled my hand away, not out of anger but out of fear. Fear of myself. Fear of the sweetness rising inside me, quiet but devastating. "Good night, William," I whispered, my voice hoarse with emotions too tangled to name. I turned away, leaving behind the burning weight of his gaze, still etched on my skin like an invisible mark I knew would never fully fade. The next morning sunlight slipped through the curtains, casting a soft golden light that seemed to blanket everything in a false sense of calm. I moved about the kitchen mechanically, brewing coffee, setting plates, flipping slices of bread on the skillet. My hands moved but my mind was elsewhere, still drifting in the silent depths of that night. Footsteps echoed down the stairs. John and William laughing, shoving at each other like carefree boys. Their laughter was clear, pure. A cool splash against the fever that still smoldered inside me. I looked up, forcing a smile onto my face, a smile even I barely recognized as my own. "Breakfast's ready," I said, my voice somehow steadier than I felt. William sat across from me, smiling at John, chatting easily about weekend plans, soccer matches, upcoming tests. I focused on pouring more coffee into my mug, avoiding his eyes, trying not to reveal how every nerve in my body was strung taut, trembling under the weight of things unspoken. Every now and then when I least expected it, I'd catch William looking at me. Just for a second. But in that single moment, everything that had happened between us came rushing back. Raw, fierce, undeniable. I dropped my gaze quickly, hiding the heat rising to my cheeks. I told myself it was just one night. Just a fleeting dream. It meant nothing. It would pass. But deep down I knew better. Some moments once lived cannot be undone. That evening the house fell into an unusual hush. John called to say he would be staying over at a friend's. His laughter lingered in the air long after the call ended, leaving me alone with the strange, aching silence filling every corner. I curled up in my favorite chair, an open book forgotten on my lap, the words blurring into meaningless shapes. A soft knock at the door. I looked up, my heart catching painfully in my chest. William stood there, in a worn t-shirt and faded jeans, his hands tucked nervously into his pockets, his gaze carrying the same hesitation pounding in my own heartbeat. "Sorry," he said, his voice rough and low. "I didn't mean to startle you." I shook my head, forcing a casual smile. "It's all right. I was just reading." William stepped inside, sitting carefully at the far edge of the room, keeping a polite distance. But the space between us might as well have been nothing at all, the air so thick it pulsed with everything we weren't saying. We talked about little things. Homework. The weather. Fleeting, harmless subjects meant to keep the silence at bay. But nothing could silence the wild, frantic drumbeat of my heart. William fell quiet first. He turned, looking at me with those deep brown eyes wide and earnest. "See, can I ask you something?" he stammered, drawing a shaky breath like he was summoning every ounce of courage he had. "That night, did I make you uncomfortable?" The question shattered the fragile air between us. I opened my mouth to deny it, to wave it off, to retreat back into the safety of old rules. But I couldn't, because in the hush of the evening, under the tender weight of his gaze, I knew. Lying would mean losing something too precious to name. I swallowed hard, every nerve trembling under the truth pressing against my lips. No, I wasn't uncomfortable. Not because of his touch. Not because of his gaze. But because of myself, the feelings I couldn't control, the thoughts I was never supposed to have. I shook my head slowly, deliberately, my eyes never leaving his. "No," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You didn't." Relief washed over his face like a tide finally breaking free. He dropped his gaze, his hands twisting tightly in his lap, his knuckles turning white. I've always thought you were the most incredible person," he said, voice breaking like a boy admitting his first real secret. I sat frozen, unable to breathe. William looked up, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in his gaze, only raw, aching honesty. "Not just because you're beautiful," he added, voice rough with the weight of his emotions. "Because you're strong. Because you're kind. Because every time I was here I felt like I belonged. Like I was safe." I felt my heart fracture in a way that was both devastating and beautiful. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I was just a tired, worn-down woman with too many cracks to hide. But the words wouldn't come. William didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply offered his truth and waited for mine. And in that thin, trembling slice of silence between two breaths, I realized he wasn't a boy anymore. And I was no longer strong enough to deny what was burning quietly, fiercely inside me. I stayed still, the world outside fading to a soft haze, until it felt like only the two of us remained, suspended, breathless, on the precipice of something fragile and infinite. Without thinking, without planning, my hand moved toward him, as if pulled by something beyond reason. Our fingers brushed. William flinched slightly, as if afraid the moment would break. But when I didn't pull away, he threaded his fingers through mine, slow, gentle, reverent. "You shouldn't," I whispered, the protest weak, already crumbling at the edges. "I know," he breathed back, his voice thick and low. He leaned in slowly, asking permission with every fraction of space he crossed. And instead of retreating, I closed my eyes and let myself fall into it. His lips brushed mine, soft, tentative, trembling like a whispered prayer. That first kiss wasn't wild. It wasn't reckless. It was a careful, aching question. "Are you sure? Are you here with me?" And when I didn't pull away, when instead I laced my fingers tighter through his, William let out a broken, trembling sound, a quiet sob of relief against my mouth. Our kiss deepened, slow and reverent, as if we were trying to memorize the taste of something forbidden and precious. His heart thundered wildly against mine. And in that moment nothing else mattered. No rules. No fears. No past or future. Only this. A touch. A breath. A surrender. We lost ourselves in that kiss, wild and tender, reckless and clear-eyed. Helpless in the moment we crossed a line we could never uncross. The next morning, the house hummed with its familiar sounds. The soft rush of water from the faucet, the clink of dishes, the thudding rhythm of John's sneakers against the wooden floors. Outwardly, everything appeared untouched. Untouched by the night that had changed everything. I poured coffee into my usual mug. My hand was steady. My voice when I greeted John was light, natural, the same as any other morning. But deep inside, a silent tremor kept rippling through me. A quiet underground wave waiting to break. William sat at the breakfast table, shoveling pancakes into his mouth like always. He laughed with John, tossing around stories about homework, video games, weekend soccer games. Two boys unaware that, just hours ago, a line had been crossed so silently it barely left a trace. Except inside me. I glanced at William over the rim of my coffee cup. For a fleeting second our eyes met. And in that instant everything rushed back. The trembling hands, the breathless heat of his skin against mine. The lingering sweetness of a kiss that had stolen the ground from beneath our feet. William quickly looked away. His fingers tightening around his fork as if struggling to hold himself inside the fragile shell of normalcy. I turned my face aside, hiding the sigh that almost escaped my lips. On the surface we were still the same people. But underneath the familiar, every glance, every small gesture carried a truth that refused to be erased. We had changed, and there was no way back. The day dragged by like a half-formed dream. I buried myself in small, meaningless tasks, wiping tables, rearranging bookshelves, picking dead leaves from the patio. Tiny rituals, desperate anchors against the chaos churning inside me. As the dusk thickened outside the windows, and the house grew heavy with ticking clocks and whispering shadows, my phone buzzed. A message. I just wanted to ask. Are you okay? William. Just one simple, quiet line. No punctuation. No flourish. But it struck me like a fist to the chest. I sat there staring at the screen, fingers trembling at the edges of the phone. Part of me wanted to delete the message, erase it, bury myself in silence. But another part, stronger, louder, begged me to answer because I knew silence wouldn't save me from what we had already unleashed. I typed slowly, every word weighing heavy in my chest. Are you? I hit send. Seconds later, his reply flashed across the screen. I don't know. Plain. Honest. Wounded. We sat at opposite ends of a distance no message could bridge. And yet, somehow, we were tethered to each other by a thread, thin, fraying, burning slow in the dark, needing only a spark to ignite everything we were trying so hard to contain. In the nights that followed, I lay awake in the dark, my eyes wide open, searching the ceiling for answers that never came. I asked myself the same questions again and again, until they drove me mad. Had we already gone too far? Could we still stop this? Was there still a way to put everything back in its rightful place? And every time I thought about pulling away, about cutting off the texts, about closing the door to William for good, something inside me would tear open, raw and aching. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't find peace. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel him. His mouth trembling against mine. His gaze drowning me in feelings I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I told myself it was just loneliness. Just a passing weakness. Just a mirage born of long parched days and endless nights. But deep down I knew better. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't confusion. It was a call. A fierce, steady heartbeat from a part of me that had been buried under years of duty and silence. Every time my phone lit up, my heart would leap into my throat, hoping for his name. Every nightfall I wandered deeper into a maze between desire and reason, and found myself caring less and less about finding the exit. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was this. I was already sinking. And the scariest part was that I wasn't sure I wanted to swim back to shore. On Friday night, John called, his voice bright and carefree, telling me he'd be staying out late for a group project. Laughter spilled through the line, assuring me he wouldn't be home until morning. I ended the call and stood alone in the kitchen, feeling the first ripple of a current I couldn't stop. Inside me, fear and hope collided, sending a shudder through my bones. I didn't call William. I didn't text. I sent no signal. But an hour later, a soft knock came at the door. When I opened it, he stood there. Silent, serious, his eyes darker, heavier with something neither of us dared speak. We didn't need words. We didn't need permission. Laws of reason had already been abandoned. Tonight was a different kind of surrender. We sat across from each other in the living room, the air between us trembling, alive. I gripped my hands tightly in my lap, feeling my chest contract under the weight of everything I couldn't say. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I whispered, the words breaking in the thick, tender silence. William nodded slowly, every movement deliberate, heavy. "Neither do I," he said, voice low, rough with emotion. I bit down on my lower lip, the truth clawing its way out. "But we've already started." William leaned forward, his eyes burning with an honesty that tore through me. "If you tell me to go," he whispered, "I will." I looked into him, into the boy who knew the cost, into the man who chose to stay despite it. And I knew I couldn't tell him to leave. Not because I was weak. Not because I had lost control. But because after a lifetime of living for everyone else, I was desperate to live for myself. Even if it was only for one night. I didn't answer right away. I sat there, feeling my heart hammering against my ribs, feeling my breath catch fire between us, burning everything that had once kept me safe. Part of me wanted to scream, wanted to tell him to go, to forget everything that had happened between us, to save us both from a future weighed down with consequences. But another part, the truest, deepest part, only whispered his name in silent desperation, aching for William to stay, aching for him the same way I ached to feel alive. I exhaled, a breath that carried both surrender and release. "I can't," I murmured, my eyes locked onto his. "I can't tell you to leave." A light flickered in his gaze, not triumph but a trembling kind of relief, like he hardly dared to believe what he was hearing. William didn't rush toward me. He didn't push or demand. He simply slowly extended his hand toward me. Open, patient, waiting. A silent invitation. A wordless plea. I looked at his hand, warm, steady, trembling ever so slightly, and knew there were no more words needed. Because love, longing, loneliness, and bravery had all been folded into that single unspoken gesture. I reached out, placing my hand into his, feeling the frantic but honest pulse racing beneath his fingertips. William closed his hand around mine. Not too tight, not too loose, just enough to say, "I'm here. I won't let go." We sat there, hand in hand, as if even the slightest movement might shatter the fragile holiness that had settled around us. No promises were made. No futures were painted. Only this moment, a vow without words, a promise stitched silently into the space between heartbeats, that no matter right or wrong, no matter what morning would bring, tonight we would live true to our hearts. We didn't rush. We didn't collide into each other like starving souls chasing a fleeting hunger. We simply sat there, still breathing, clinging to each other, like two wanderers finally finding a home after lifetimes adrift. I felt the warmth of William's palm seeping slowly into my skin, steady and patient, like a hidden spring reviving a soul that had been barren for far too long. No words were necessary. No declarations. Just the look in his eyes, holding everything I had once longed for and dared not name. Respect. Understanding. Desire, unburdened by expectations or rules. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know whether this choice would save me or destroy me. I only knew that, in this moment, I was not just someone's mother. Not just a woman who had given up her own dreams. I was myself, whole, vulnerable, strong, fragile, and aching to be loved. William shifted closer, slowly, cautiously, as if afraid he might frighten me. He didn't touch me beyond the clasp of our hands. He simply waited, offering a quiet shelter if I chose to lean into him. I nodded just once, a small trembling nod. And when I rested my head against the steady strength of William's shoulder, I realized something. Sometimes living true to your heart for just one night is enough. Even if tomorrow brought regret. Even if everything crumbled into ashes. Tonight I had chosen myself. That night we didn't need excuses. We didn't need to run. We surrendered to instinct, to the raw beating of our hearts, to everything reason had tried to lock away for so long. We touched each other like two lost travelers finally stumbling upon an oasis in a barren desert. Not because of need, not because of sin, but because in a world built of walls and obligations, sometimes the only way to truly live is to dive headfirst into the depths of your own forbidden longing. We knew that morning would bring cruel clarity. We knew that what we were building might collapse, might leave scars that would never fully heal. But right then there was no past, no future, only the burning, breathless present, where two souls adrift found each other in wildness and courage. Because love doesn't always have to be righteous. Sometimes, love is simply daring to look deep into the most hidden corners of yourself and saying yes even when you know the cost.